Hi. Hey. I wanted to pop out here and read you something that I wrote back in 2019 because I stumbled on it the other day for a variety of reasons I'll tell you about. And I read something I wrote. It was in my second book, Unscripted. No, that was my first book in 2015. Second was in 2019. So I wrote it in 2019, Ignite. And I read it and I was like, wow, this feels more relevant now. It's like I wrote it back then so I could read it now. And it was about this whole idea, because I'm hearing other people say this, of what's the point? What's the point? Especially after that election we just lived through. Anybody working with women leaders, as I do, as working with the climate, working in social justice, racial justice. It's just a time of deep courage and exhaustion and resourcefulness. And, you know it. You're living it. If you're watching me, you're sort of moving in that general direction. So I'm hearing, and I heard a lot of the week after the election, what's the point? And I engage that question actively rather than just fight it with logic, because that doesn't work. Fear, shame, doubt, despair, exhaustion, it doesn't work to combat it with logic. I don't know if you've picked up on that yet, but that's what I see from where I sit. And so I was craving art in my world. For Thanksgiving, as a family, we got away to Canada and we stumbled on an art installation and artists. And I just, that has been a big theme for me over the last year and over my life of 56 years. So what a lot of people don't know about me is that I was an art major in college. And I was a visual arts major, and I studied photography and graphic design, and I was going to be working on Madison Avenue as an ad exec. That was my plan. And that didn't happen happily. And I found myself here. And so over the course of my life, I've often joked about my art major, and I joked I was almost a triple major, but I was, 2 classes away from a triple major. So I counted up all my credits, and art had the most. So I became an art major, and I was very flippant about it. And anybody who knows me truly knows that that is an essential part of who I am. I have ink on my pinky because I'm left-handed, and that's an inky pinky. I'm always drawing, crafting, anything. Pottery, knitting, jewelry, painting, bead stuff. I mean, anything I can get my hands on, I'm always making art. And I've never taken it seriously, I believe, until this year. Matter of fact, just Tuesday, I changed my profile on Instagram. I went on Instagram for the first time since April 2021. When I went off, and I changed my profile to read artist. And that's what I want to do. I want to share art and pictures of what I see, because I think the world could use some more of that right now. So if you want to check that out, you can check out my Instagram thing. And then I also pitched yesterday to lead an art retreat. And we'll see where that goes. But that surprised me, and it's the most natural thing I have ever done. So all of this is to say, this is a really personal conversation for me around what's the point, because I'm about to talk to you about creating, which is something we do as humans, but it's also this existential question a lot of us are having of what's the point. So I thought I'd share an excerpt from this chapter for what it's worth. So here I go. Need my glasses. This is from Ignite, my book Ignite, chapter 12 or something. The Almighty Point, it's called. What's the point of doing it if it's not good? I hear that question so often from my clients. Hell, I ask that question so often of myself, so I can appreciate firsthand how every slight detour or deviation from our normal day-to-day operations are often met with an elaborate vetting system with plenty of checks and balances and hoops to jump through to give ourselves permission to do it. At which point we're so thoroughly exhausted from the Robert's Rules of Orders in our head, we've long since checked out and given up and crawled deep under the pile of other words that take the fizz out of our ginger ale, like pragmatic, productive, valuable, good enough, worth it, or my personal favorite, prudent. These are all words designated to get us back on track. Whose track that is exactly can be a whole other conversation. Bottom line, we're off it, be it a track, a rocker, or a point. So on that day, when my client asked herself that question, what's the point? We paused. Rather than barreling through with the assumption that there was a point, we actually spent some time considering that question from a place of curiosity rather than judgment. She had been trying to carve out some time in her busy life to feed her creativity, deciding that painting was something that she wanted to do more of, except she wasn't doing it. It was clear she was hitting something, resistance, fear, overwhelm, or some concoction of all three. And when I extrapolated her specific experience across all the similar questions I've heard from women over the years, it starts to sound something like this. What's the point of making art if it's not good? What's the point of writing if no one reads it? What's the point of making music if no one hears it? What's the point of gardening if the plants are just going to die? What's the point of fighting for change if there's always someone who's going to disagree with you? What's the point of trying something new if you don't have time to master it? What's the point of slowing down if you will have a pile of work waiting for you when you return? What's the point of fresh cut flowers by your bed if you won't even see them while you sleep? What's the point of romance and intimacy if you don't have a partner? What's the point of sending a handwritten thank you note if it's just faster to send a text or an email? What's the point of giving something if you don't get credit for it? What's the point of having a business if you don't grow it? What's the point of crying if it doesn't change anything? What is the point? This is the voice we answer to in our society. This is what keeps us in our heads, keeps us up at night, keeps us from trying anything new, scary, or different. This is the voice that accuses us of wasting our time. This is the judge we plead our cases before when it comes to allowing desire, pleasure, joy, beauty, play, stillness, the natural world, intimacy, our emotions, our truth take center stage. This is the voice that determines what is worthy of our time. Do you see what I'm getting at? We've lost our way. Ironically, we've missed the point in our feverish attempts to stick the landing. We've let our heartbreaks bleed out, sometimes to death, instead of honoring them for what they are, a heart fire ignited. And yet, our hearts keep beating, and our desire, it just keeps rising. We've lost our way because our love of the destination, forward progress, the outcome, and the return on the investment. We've lost our way because we can't imagine a world beyond the barricades we've built. We've forgotten that lines aren't the only forms we humans can make, and that there are more crayons for us to color with other than black and white and a few shades of gray. Women will help us to see beyond the barricades. They will remind us how we can curve and bend. We can wax and wane. We can ebb and flow. We can rise and set. We can wander and not be lost. We can be present and moving. We can be still and active. We can bleed and not die. We can be silent and engaged. Women will remind us because this is their native soil. And we've lived on it for lifetimes, silently, privately, often hidden from view, in order to survive in a society built on the opposite values. As the guardians of the wellspring, women are getting more ferocious in their devotion to it because once they've lost and then found their way back to it, they remember enough for all of us. We are designed to have curves even as we live in a world that favors lines. We are designed to have cycles, even as we move in a society that asks us to run like machines. We are designed to bleed regularly and not die, even as our bodies are disparaged, dishonored, and violated. We are designed to be inconsistent, even though we are trained that steady, regular, modulated movement is best. We are designed to see webs of interconnectedness, even as we exist within a culture that seeks to actively divide us. We are designed to create a new life inside us, even though it's viewed as inconvenient, disruptive, burdensome, and unmentionable. Maybe that's the point, the massive power we hold as women. And yet our heads continue to pummel us with questions. It's just what heads do. In the case of my client, she wanted to know, where am I going with this? Why does this matter? How will this help anything? How is this not a waste of my time? What if nothing changes as a result? What if I suck and people laugh? What if I'm really good and I really am an artist? What if I can't stop? What if I don't ever want to stop? What if it makes me cry? Then what do I do? What happens next? Our poor, tired heads. They work so damn hard for us, don't they? But here's the point, beautiful heads. We've forgotten the power and pleasure that comes from actively engaging our senses. And that's critical because it brings color and vitality into a world that has drained so much of it from our people. We've forgotten that rapture and presence feel like. And that's critical to our humanity because it connects us to hope, each other, and this big, beautiful blue-green planet we share. We've forgotten how to live from our bodies. And that's critical because so many of us are sick and tired and something's got to give at a time when so many of us feel like we've got nothing left to offer. What if it were the other way around? What if we lived in a world where the value system was flipped and the point didn't really matter? What if we didn't give away so much damn power to the point? What if joy, happiness, fulfillment we're seeking weren't dependent on being seen, heard, bought, or applauded? Because if art imitates life, then maybe the opposite is true, which would position the artists among us as leaders. Let me ask you this. What makes an artist an artist? The number of hours she dedicates to her craft, the school where she studied, the number of pieces sold, when her art is able to support her financially, when she gets her own show. We have conversations like this a lot in my family, probably because I was an art major in college, and I can get a bit prickly about it. One of my boys will point out a minimalist painting in a museum and with, say, a simple white square in the center of a white canvas and say, "How is that art? I could have made that." And before I can say anything, the other will jump in and say, "I know what you're going to say, Mom. Yeah, but you didn't make that." They know me pretty well, apparently. An artist is an artist when she says yes to what's inside her. Could the same be true of leaders? What if it wasn't about your title, your credibility, or electability, or any ability? Your experience, where you went to school, who you know, how many likes or followers you have, the color of your skin, or if you look like a leader. It might be about all that. It just wouldn't be because of all that. This isn't about our beautiful heads at all. It's about consistently and fiercely feeding the fire that lives in our hearts. What kind of world would we live in if we could all set our hearts on fire? I believe women will show us how if we follow their lead. But it will require us working together as we never have before and getting fierce about it, maybe even pissing people off who have a vested interest in us not banding together, maybe even making art like our lives depended on it. So I wrote that back in 2019, and man, I just read it recently, and it feels more relevant to me now than it did before when I wrote it. And I almost, flinch a little bit, cringe a little bit reading it, sharing it with you today, because the hardest work I ever do is to hold space for women, to talk about being a woman. At first, my business is 20 years old this December, and which is now. So it's 20 years. And when I first started my business, I was told that I was crazy to focus on women because I was immediately cutting off half my market share. And somehow I didn't bite that hook, and I held my instincts, and I'm so glad I did. And off I went, and because of you and the audience I found over the years, it's just been infinitely rich and rewarding and the gift of a lifetime. And then the gender fluidity came in, and with multiple pronouns, and now I hear a lot of, it's not so much about men and women, it's about why do we need to even talk about this as women? Why can't we just talk about humans? And it reminds me of Black Lives Matter. Why can't we talk about all lives mattering? And I'm like, because we have a very specific need to talk about Black Lives Mattering. And I believe we have a very specific need to talk about women. And that's the space I hold. And it's getting harder and harder to do. Even in my own communities, it's harder to do. So I'm gathering with a group in my women's circle tonight to talk, and the women's circle is on being a woman. And tonight we talk about the feminine, which is the masculine, and it's coupled with the masculine around wholeness. But the doorway we often go through in this, it's often synonymous with gender. And sometimes that's a doorway we need to go through to get to the feminine conversation. And there's always resistance to it. And it's always messy. And it's just hard in this world to talk about being a woman. So when I read that to you today, it's risky still. And yet I'm doing it. So I thought I'd share that with you for the artists, for the women, and for the world. Take care of yourself.